Okay, let's see if this thing's going to let me record. Oh, sorry about the crunchy noise. My chair was on a bag. Okay, this is to show how to make this absolutely cute and adorable little K-cup coffee pod holder thing and not have to have a die. So, this is the template. It's actually pretty easy. Once you make your master template, then you can just make them all day long. This is one that I'll have ready and we'll put together so y'all can see it. And this are the two pieces, 5.5 by 6.5, so you can get one holder out of one sheet of cardstock. If you cut it down to 6.5 inches and then cut it in half at 5.5, then you can get one holder. So what we do is, using these measurements, you're going to start with the piece of cardstock on the longest side, on the 6.5 inch width. And you're going to make 2 score lines to begin with. You're going to score it at the 2 inch and at the 6 inch. So you're going to score this line and this line first. Then you're going to turn it and we're going to score it at 1.5 inches and 3.5 inches. And the reason I did it this way was, first reason was so that I could get one completed little thing out of one sheet of cardstock. And the other reason is you don't really need the full 2 inches at the bottom to fold up and make the box bottom, but you do need to have the two 2-inch sections for the top. Okay, then you're going to turn it back, and you want to make sure that 1/2 inch section is to the far right of your scoring tool, just like it was when you began. And then you're going to score at 4 inches, but only to that score line there. So 4 inches, and then we're going to stop right there, which is at the 3.5 inch score line when we had it in our scoreboard that direction. So let me get this one done. We're going to score at 2 inches and 6 inches. Then turn it, score at 1.5, 3.5, then turn it back and score at 4 inches, only to that first line. Now, the rest of this is basically all the sections that we have to cut away. We're going to cut away this top skinny part, this bottom skinny part. Of course, for your bottom flaps, you're going to cut angles so that you just have nicer corners when they fold in. Then this section here, we have to add one more score line. Or not a score line. We have to mark it because it's going to be a cut line. But the easiest way to mark that, just so that it keeps you on point, is use a ruler and your bone folder and make that little line there so that you know exactly where your scissors need to cut. And I'm not going to tell y'all how many pieces of cardstock I messed up before I got the angle right. I kept doing it from this direction. Well, I actually only did it once. Second time, I taped it back together so that I could make sure that it was going to work. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how I cut this apart. And you want to make sure that you remove all of the score lines. And when I say remove all the score lines, when you flip your piece over on the back side, you're going to have all these humped lines. We don't want any of those, so we want to remove them. This is going to be easier if I use these big scissors so that I can do this in one chomp. And that's just going to follow that line that we made. And you could eyeball that, but for me to make sure I didn't mess up, I did it that way. So now we've removed these two sections. So this part is correct. Now we want to remove this top section here. Making sure we remove that score line. Then this part here is the part where we want to cut out that humped line from the back side. So using where that humped line is as our guide, we're only going to cut to that little triangle section and then cut that off. I'll see if I can do this without having folded it yet. So that's what we want the top section to now look like. This has been removed. We've removed that scored line, and these two sections have been removed. Now the rest of it actually goes pretty fast. That was the only part that kept being a little bit of a sticky wicket for me, was because I messed up twice on that angle. And I think that's because I was trying to do it too fast from a little drawing I had done. And then cut a little bit of an angle there. So that's it. That's half of our little box. So now we're going to do the same thing here. I can do this part better with these bigger scissors. So I have to get my paper just right under the light, or I can't see the scored lines. So, and then we can take that off to there. So now that part's gone. Now I can use my little scissors and come back in and take that off. And then remove that humped line. Oh, come on. And then cut that edge off. And then do the middle part, giving it that little bit of an angle. And there. Okay, now let me move all these pieces. And I kept my two pieces that had these squares in case I needed to cut anything out that those would fit on, because those were 2-inch square pieces. And I actually used them when it come to cutting the little coffee cup and stuff that I did on that one. Okay, now the first thing I like to do is match up my joining seam so that then this becomes all one larger piece. And as a guide, to kind of make sure I get them even across the bottom, I'm just going to lay my gridded ruler here and kind of push them into it so that I have them right where I need them to be. So I'm going to put some glue. And this is just the art glitter glue because I prefer to use wet glue, but you can use score tape if you choose to do so. I just like wet glue. But what you want is you want to join this so that you can actually still see, pick it up carefully, so that you can still see that indented score line. When you cover that line up, that's when you're going to bind your piece. So I'm going to let that sit flat for a minute and let that one dry. And I'm actually going to put this one together and do the exact same thing. I just figured the white might be a little easier to see the cutting away of all the sections. Plus, I had already done this one this morning and then decided, oh, I should really put that one together in a tutorial. So I did the same thing. I can still see my scored line, and the piece I joined to it is just to the outer edge of that score line. So now we'll let this one dry. And before we do anything else to this one, I'm going to show you how I created this background of all the little coffee themed stuff. I bought, let me find my little envelope. I bought these two little sets of clear coffee-themed stamps off of eBay. And I just picked different ones for different projects. So I used some from both sets and just put them all kind of randomly on this acrylic block. Then when I ink it up, let me see if I can set this to the side. Then all of my images are inked, and what I did was I started with stamping in one direction. Then when I stamped it again, I turned the stamp to another direction. And so I continued to do that until I had randomly filled up the entire piece, because I joined this one together just like I have here before I ever started doing anything. And then it just keeps movement throughout the whole project. And I just thought the little images that I chose created a pretty cool little background. So that was the reason for doing it that way. There. So how cool is that? So you can put more than, just put a bunch of images and then they all work. Then the only other thing I did, and I'm not going to spend the time doing it on this one, but just to show you, is I just took my... This is the, Gathered Twigs Distress ink, and then just went around every single cut line on the piece and all the score lines. So I'm not going to do that on this one. I'm going to show, get it picked up here, how to then put it together. We've got this joined right here, so we know that seam is done. Then what we want to do is we want to fold up and crease all the other scored lines. And this was a patterned cardstock. This is actually a cardstock weight. Had the little dots pattern on one side. I think I had got it at Walmart. And it was just pretty spring colors. And so I thought, I bet I could turn this into a cute holder. So I chose the pink out of it's got like 4 or 5 different cardstock colors, and they all have just the white polka dots. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then fold that one that we joined the first time. And then we'll fold this one in. And now the only score line you're not going to fold is this one right here. You don't want to fold this in just to keep from so much configuring to try to get this and this. It was easier just to include that as an entire scored line instead of trying to just do this and then cut that off. But if you want to work out a way to do it, then I say by all means do it. So these 2 score lines here, you kind of ignore. And if you want to, you can even take your bone folder or whatever tool and kind of rub them back flat from the back side. It doesn't really make them go away, but it does lighten them enough that you don't really realize they're there. But this line, you do want to fold over and crease it well, because this is the section that you're going to fold in, and then you can punch a little hole to make the little handle for the piece. So we've got everything scored and everything's ready to go on this one, which is kind of nice because we didn't have to do any stamping or inking or anything on it. And I think it's going to be just as cute as the first one. So then we're going to fold that over, join that seam, and then I like to take and give it a fold in the opposite direction just so that we can reinforce that and make it really nice and square. So we haven't done the bottom yet, but these are the 2 pieces that you're going to then fold in, and then once we fold the bottom up, how cute is that? So what I want to do first then is fold in, I'll figure it out in a minute, y'all. Fold in the 2 short sides, and I'm just going to put a little bit of glue just to hold them in place. And then put some glue there to hold that in place. Set it down, and then just take my bone folder and kind of tamp all that down into place. Look at that. Is that not cute as a button? And so super easy. I mean, once you've got your template made, you could sit there and make like buku of these. Then put your glue, line that up, press it into place good. We'll give that a minute to sit there and dry. And then I'll show you how I punched the little handle. Look at that. It's ready to add fufu. And the only thing I had done so far to go on it was the little tag. And then I wanted to show you an idea for one of the little tops to go on the little pod. So here, all I did, I cut this using one of my dies that I got off eBay. And I went back and I did just the top. I put the little like indented white part. I added it back in there just so they'd create a little dimension. And this, of course, the heart was just white, and I relined it and cut it out again so that I could line some of the dots up in it. And then this is just a little tag that I cut, and I'm just going to brush a little ink around the tag just to kind of create a little dimension on it and keep it from looking quite so flat. And then the little cup fits nicely at a little angle on there. So we'll just add a little bit of glue to the back side of it. And then you could like clean up, you know, if you used one of the stamps that you had on this that had the word coffee, or there was plenty more in the set that had text, you could always go back and add something like that to it, or it's pretty self-explanatory, so you wouldn't necessarily have to do that. But this is a cute way to make a little top to go on the K-cup so that when you have it in the container. I started here with an 1.5 inch circle just out of white. Then I did an 1 3/8 out of the same pattern paper, and you'll notice it's got a nice little white edge. I figured since the white polka dots, that would be the easiest way to do it. And then the little 5-petal flower. And you can make that dimensional or foo-foo it. I was just keeping it simple right now. And then I did just a little, this is just a little regular hole punch where I caught just the pink of the paper. And then that would be cute to add to the top of your K-cup. Now, I would recommend either having it like this, where it fits within the perimeter and would make it easier to peel off, or use a removable tape. And I use a lot of Scotch poster tape whenever I'm working with something that I want to make removable. And it would just take a tiny little piece of it and put on the back of your little flower piece, and remove that. And then you can take and you can just kind of tack that. And there's just enough sticky that it'll hold it on the top of the K-cup. And then that would just be cute to have sitting in there and have some of the same color, you know, that you've made your box out of. And that was just kind of an option if you wanted to do it that way. And then this one, because I used a smaller tag in the smaller cup, I put it just on the side where the handle was. But on this one, I'm actually going to put it here because I'm actually going to give this to someone. But, oh, where's my little punch? I used this, I think it's a Stampin' Up! Punch. It's I think they call it the small oval. I have a little 1-inch round punch, but I don't have it in the house, so this was the only thing I had that I could grab. And just slip it up in there, kind of eyeball it, and then just punch. And there's your little handle for your little container. And then put just a little bit of glue on there. And if you wanted to go back and add some kind of little foo-foo or a piece of ribbon or even another little tag that had a to and from kind of thing for it. But that's just how simple it is to, only made one little top. But that's just how simple it is to do it. And then whatever else you do to them, to foo-foo them, is totally up to you. There's some really good ideas online. Just check them all out, see what else, gives you ideas. And then I'm sure there's all kind of other little containers that you could use this for. And you wouldn't have to necessarily use little K-cups. You could use it to hold all kinds of little things. And then you just have the little handle on the top of the basket. But that's just how easy it is to do it. 5.5 by 6.5 inch. You need 2 pieces. You need to score each of them at the 4-inch mark, the 6-inch mark on the 6.5 inch side. Turn it, score it at 1.5 inches and 3.5 inches on the 5.5 inch side. Turn it back, and at the 4-inch line, only score to that first or the 3.5 inch line on that first side. Then just remember to make that angled cut, and then all the pieces that you cut away, and that will be what you end up with to work off of if you want to make them and stamp them up and then decorate them, or if you want to start with the cardstock and that already has a design on it and go from there. So that's my project of the day. Hope that helped. Y'all have any questions, just holler. Thanks. Bye.